In today's video, we are going to be talking about what diet is best for insulin resistance. Is it a diet low in carbs and high in fat, or high in carbs and low in fat? Insulin resistance will eventually lead to type 2 diabetes, and it also increases your risk of developing heart disease and PCOS. Signs you are insulin resistant include excess abdominal fat, cravings after eating, and dark skin patches. By addressing insulin resistance early, you can stop it in its tracks and reverse it before it escalates and leads to other diseases. The best way to do this is through changing your diet, but there is some debate over which diet is the best at reversing insulin resistance. Does fat cause insulin resistance, or is it the carbohydrates? In today's video, we're going to compare the low-fat diet to the low-carb diet, look at the evidence, and talk about which works best for reversing insulin resistance. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Kate. I'm a health coach and I post videos on a high-fat, nutrient-dense way of eating. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, feel free to share, and make sure to subscribe. And make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, where I share new posts every single day. Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. For everything from websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that does it all. Head to squarespace.com/healthcoachkate to start your free trial today. Today, we are going to talk about what diet is best for reversing insulin resistance. Supporters of the low-fat diet will say that fat is the cause of insulin resistance, and to reverse it, you need to limit fat. Supporters of the low-carb diet will say that carbs are the reason for insulin resistance. And to reverse it, you need to limit carbs. Now, thankfully, this has been a subject that has been highly studied over the last few decades. Researchers have compared low-fat versus low-carb diets to see which is better for weight loss, type 2 diabetes, and PCOS, all of which tie in with insulin resistance. So we're going to start off today looking at a few significant studies done on low-carb and low-fat diets in the context of insulin resistance. And then we will talk about how you can apply this information to your own situation to reverse your insulin resistance. What it means to be insulin resistant. Before we get into it, I am going to give a quick recap of what insulin resistance is. If you are already familiar and want to skip ahead, I always have timestamps, or chapters as YouTube calls them, on the progress bar down below. The TLDR of insulin resistance is that it is a state where your cells are no longer responding to insulin in the way that they should. One of insulin's main roles in the body is to regulate blood sugar. Usually when we eat, blood sugar rises and the pancreas releases insulin in response. The insulin then ushers the excess sugar out of the blood and into your cells. Now, when you become insulin resistant, your cells basically shut the door. They stop responding to insulin. This leads to your insulin levels remaining high, which makes you become more insulin resistant, and it becomes a vicious cycle. And high insulin, or hyperinsulinemia, leads to a whole host of other problems. When insulin is high, it is difficult to lose weight because high insulin indicates there is excess energy that needs to be stored as fat. High insulin can also lead to PCOS because insulin blocks the ovaries from turning testosterone into estrogen. Because of this, there's no spike in estrogen that usually happens before ovulation, and no ovulation. Cysts then form on the ovaries and testosterone remains high. And these are just a few examples of the role insulin resistance plays in other diseases. What the science says. Now, as I said before, there have been a lot of studies comparing low-carb and low-fat diets. We are going to look at a few individual studies that I found to be very striking, and then we're going to take a look at a meta-analysis, which pooled together a whole bunch of studies, and then came to a conclusion. The first study we are going to look at was done on 83 obese subjects over 12 weeks. Obesity and insulin resistance tend to go hand in hand. Most people who are obese are also insulin resistant. Participants were split up into 3 groups. The first ate 70% of their calories from carbs and 10% from fat. The second had 50% of their calories from carbs and 30% from fat. And the final was a ketogenic diet with less than 5% carbs and over 60% fat. All three groups ate the exact same amount of calories over the course of the study. At the end of the study, fat loss was similar between the three groups. But when it came to insulin levels, the results were significantly different. The very low-carb, high-fat group lowered fasting insulin by 33%, and the moderate carb group by 19%. There was no change in fasting insulin with the high-carb group. This study I found extremely fascinating because all three groups ate the same amount of calories, but the changes they saw to fasting insulin were very different. To reverse insulin resistance, you want to keep your insulin low. When insulin is low, your cells become more sensitive. The study went on to conclude, very low-carb diets are effective in improving insulin concentrations. Very low-carb diets may be useful in the short-term management of subjects with insulin resistance. The next study went over 1 year and had just under 350 participants, all with type 2 diabetes. Now, we need to remember that type 2 diabetes happens as a result of insulin resistance. If you let insulin resistance progress far enough, the insulin will no longer be able to control your blood sugar, and that is when you will be formally diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. In this study, everyone ate a very low-carb ketogenic diet. Most of the participants were obese, and 87% of them were on type 2 diabetes medication. This study was actually trying to compare the difference it would make if participants were able to work more closely with a health coach or doctor, as opposed to the standard care model, where they only saw their doctor infrequently. After 1 year, 94% of the participants who were prescribed insulin medication previously were able to reduce or stop their medication entirely. 100% of those prescribed sulfonylureas, a medication that also plays a role in increasing insulin, no longer had a need for it. The patients who were only receiving the standard amount of care did not see any changes in medication use and other biomarkers. The study concluded, this suggests the novel care model studied here using dietary carbohydrate restriction and continuous remote care can safely support adults with type 2 diabetes to lower HbA1c, weight, and medicine use. So what can we take away from this? The participants who are working with a health coach or doctor were much more likely to understand and adhere to the low-carb diet, which is why they saw better results than the other group. And almost 100% of these individuals saw improvements in their type 2 diabetes, so much so that they were able to reduce or get off their medication entirely. And this means that their insulin sensitivity was improving. Because the thing you need to know about type 2 diabetes is that the medication prescribed is often insulin or something that increases insulin production. It is thought that because the cells are not responding to insulin correctly, the solution is to add more insulin. This works temporarily, but then the body becomes more resistant. And this is why type 2 diabetics often find they have to continually increase their dose. These medications make you more and more insulin resistant. And the fact that they were able to reduce or eliminate their medication shows how much of an improvement they saw to their insulin resistance, simply through a diet change. Now, the other thing we can learn from this study is that low-carb diets can be difficult to understand and adhere to. So if you are insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic and you have previously tried a low-carb or keto diet without success, I urge you to give it another go. If it seems overwhelming or confusing, I've put together a 7-day crash course that will give you everything you need to know to start the keto diet in the simplest way. By joining the program, you also get access to an exclusive Facebook group where you can ask me questions and I can offer support. If you want to check that out, you can click the link in my bio or head to healthcoachkate.com/keto-start. So that was a study that showed overwhelmingly the effectiveness of low-carb diets for insulin resistance. And I wanted to show a study specifically done on low-fat, high-carb diets next. But here's the thing, I could not find a study on low-fat diets for insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes that yielded anywhere near the same results. And the more I dug into it, the more evidence I found supporting low-carb diets for insulin resistance. There was one study that compared a low-fat vegan diet to the conventional diabetes diet for 72 weeks, with roughly 50 subjects following each diet. At the end of the 72 weeks, there really was not a significant difference between the two groups. Both groups lost weight. The low-fat vegan group lost 4.4 kilos on average, and the conventional group lost 3 kilos on average. Although blood sugar control seemed to be slightly better with the low-fat vegan group. Another study looked at 477 different studies done on people with type 2 diabetes and found that a vegetarian diet was associated with improved glycemic control. But the fact that there was no mention of reducing or eliminating medication, I think says a lot. Just about every study done on low-carb diets to treat type 2 diabetes mentions this. One small study concluded, the low-carb ketogenic diet improved glycemic control in patients with type 2 diabetes such that diabetes medications were discontinued or reduced in most participants. Because the low-carb ketogenic diet can be very effective at lowering blood glucose, patients on diabetes medication who use this diet should be under close medical supervision or capable of adjusting their medication. Low-carb diets are so effective at reversing insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes that anyone who is on medication needs to be extremely careful because their need for it will reduce very quickly. There have also been studies done that show high-carb, low-fat diets actually sustain insulin resistance. One study done took 4 groups of 8 metabolically healthy women and fed them meals of either 30% carbs or 60% carbs. The low-carb group showed a reduction in insulin resistance after the 3rd meal in the evening. The high-carb group experienced sustained high post-meal insulin. Now I have one more meta-analysis we're going to look at that took several randomized control trials comparing low-carb and low-fat diets specifically. But before we get into that, I'm going to take a quick moment to tell you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is at the core a website builder, but it is also so much more. Not only can you build a beautiful website that is customizable with no web design experience, but it also allows you to build a mailing list, send out email blasts, run an online store, accept transactions, and more. Their award-winning customer service team is available 24/7 to help you out with any questions you may have. I have been using Squarespace to host my website and run my business for over 2 years now, and I cannot recommend it enough. If you want to start a free trial, you can head to squarespace.com/healthcoachkate, and when you absolutely love it and decide to launch, use code healthcoachkate to save 10% off your first order. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. So this next study is a meta-analysis that looked at 23 randomized control trials, comparing low-carb diets with less than 45% carbs and low-fat diets with less than 30% carbs. Before we get into this study, I just want to say that a diet with 45% carbs is not really a low-carb diet. Let's say you're eating 2,000 calories a day. 45% of that would be 900 calories from carbs or 225 grams. Usually low-carb diets are less than 100 grams, with very low-carb diets having less than 50. But anyways, the study concluded that both diets were equally effective at reducing body weight and waist circumference. Both diets reduced participants' blood pressure, total to HDL cholesterol ratios, and total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, blood glucose, and serum insulin levels, and raised HDL cholesterol. So this is pretty underwhelming, but there is one additional note the authors had that I'm going to mention. Participants on low carbohydrate diets had greater increases in HDL cholesterol and greater decreases in triglycerides. And here is why that is important. Your triglyceride to HDL ratio is a really strong indicator of your insulin resistance or sensitivity. If you take your triglyceride number in milligrams per deciliter and divide it by your HDL number in milligrams per deciliter, that is your triglyceride to HDL ratio. Now, if your numbers are in millimolars per liter, as they are in most places outside of the US, you will have to multiply the triglyceride number by 89 and the HDL by 39, and then enter them into the equation. If your number is less than 1.9, you are insulin sensitive. 2 to 3 and you are somewhat insulin resistant, and over 3, you are very insulin resistant. So this meta-analysis concluded that the people on low-carb diets saw the greatest increase in HDL and the greatest decrease in triglycerides, meaning that these people saw the greatest improvement in reversing insulin resistance. So when it comes to the debate over whether low-carb or low-fat diets are better for reversing insulin resistance, there really is no contest. low-carb diets come out overwhelmingly on top. And when you reverse insulin resistance, you reduce your risk of developing type 2 diabetes, you reduce your heart disease risk, and your overall health will improve. Now, if you want to know more about reversing insulin resistance and the best foods you can eat, you can check out this video next. And if you did enjoy this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up and let me know down below if you have tried a low carb or a low fat diet and if you saw any improvements for insulin resistance. Let me know down below, and thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. If you did like this video, next you might want to check out my video on reversing insulin resistance, which I mentioned before. You can find it right here. You can also catch up on my most recent upload, which will be right here. And if you want to check out my keto diet and carnivore diet coaching programs, which I also mentioned earlier, you can find them here. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye.